Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and good evening and good morning to your time. I'd like to extend my welcome to all the ladies and gentlemen who are joining the Seoul Urban Food International Conference 2022. I'm honored to stand before you as a presenter. My name is So-Yeon Lee. First of all, despite your very busy schedule, we are joined by renowned scholars around the world, and also we are joined by government officials from many countries around the world. The Seoul International Conference on Urban Food at this forum is held under the theme of building a sustainable urban food system to respond to the global food crisis. The food crisis is getting severe due to many reasons, and we are gathered to think about the responses that we can all use around the world. So we're going to examine the responses to the food crisis in each city, at home and abroad, and also we're going to seek solutions to find the directions that we can move forward together. Today's Seoul International Conference will feature presentations by domestic and international speakers, and also will have case presentations and discussions. Presentations by domestic and international speakers will focus on the global food crisis and also the responses and the local government's policies. And also, we'll talk about the case studies. Through that, we will seek solutions and also the directions that the city have to pursue together. This conference is being streamed live around the world on Seoul's YouTube channel. We have speakers connected through online, so please make sure that your video and microphone is working properly. And I would appreciate your cooperation. And I'd like to introduce participants of this conference that we are joined by renowned researchers and government officials around the world. I'd like to introduce Professor Nevin Cohen of City University of New York. Thank you. And we are privileged to have Filippo Gavazzani, Secretary General of the Milan Urban Food Policy. And also, City of Melbourne, City Safe, Miss Maria Blagoraski is joining us. And also, we have Song Won-gyu, Deputy Director of the Research Institute Yeoreum. And now I'd like to introduce the ladies and gentlemen who are here with us. I'd like to introduce the chair of today's discussion, Professor Chol-Gyu Kim of Korea University.
다음으로 서울시 정진숙 식품정책과장이
And also we have Jung Jin-suk, Director of Food Policy Division, representing Seoul City Government. And we are joined by Jeonbuk Research Institute researcher, fellow Hwang Young-mo.
마지막으로 서울
Last but
연구원
not least,
김성아
we
연구위원님께서 이
have
시간 함께
researcher
해주시겠습니다.
of Seoul Research Institute, Sung-ha Kim. Thank you.
이외에도 온라인을 통해서 정말 많은 분들이
And
지금 함께
I
해주고
can see
계시는데요.
that the many participants are joining us through online, so please stay with us until the last minute
본격적인
of
서울
the
도시 먹거리
forum. So now let's
국제
kick
컨퍼런스 2022
off
시작에 앞서서
the
서울시
Seoul's
김의승
Urban Food
부시장님의
International
인사
Conference. And
말씀이
before that,
준비가
I'd like to introduce the Vice
영상으로
City Mayor.
전달해 주셨는데요. 어떤 말씀
And let's see his opening remarks for the conference. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kim Il-sung, and I am Vice Mayor of the Seoul Metropolitan Government. I sincerely welcome you all for participating in the Seoul Urban Food Conference 2022. Also, I'd like to appreciate all the speakers and experts and audiences from home and abroad for sharing your insightful experiences and knowledge with us today with regard to the urban food policies. Some experts say that a global crisis may emerge, surpassing the global economic crisis, which hit the entire world in 2008, especially due to the COVID-19 pandemic and food price soaring coming from the Russian and Ukraine war. The current food crisis is difficult to solve in a short period of time, and socially vulnerable people will get into more difficult situation over time as the crisis deepens. Amid these tough times, cities with dense population will experience even more difficult problems. To find opportunity in crisis, Seoul City has been holding International Urban Food Conference to suggest solutions and roles with big cities and establish sustainable food system. This year, it's the fifth time for the event. With one of our city's key values coexisting with the underprivileged, the Seoul Urban Food Conference 2022 will be held under the main theme of establishing sustainable urban food system to respond to the global food crisis. During the conference, experts from home and abroad will vibrantly share knowledge and communicate about food policies to secure food for all citizens, including vulnerable people, and cities' roles for establishing sustainable food system. I hope there will be active discussions and brilliant idea sharing among the participants in terms of making cities with healthy and safe food system during the conference. Once again, I'd like to thank you for your participation. Thank you.
고맙습니다. 서울시 김의승
Thank you.
부시장님의
Mr.
인사
Kim Eui-seung,
말씀이었습니다.
Vice
신기한
Mayor
분위기,
of Seoul, delivered a welcome message. Then he mentioned that it's difficult to overcome the issue at the short term. However, that we'll be able to seek solutions in a long-term manner. So through this forum, we'll be able to find sustainable solutions. Now let's start the conference in earnest. I'd like to introduce our first speaker. We are privileged to have Professor Navin Cohen of the City University of New York. His presentation is themed Responding to the Global Food Crisis.
Hello, everyone, and I'm really delighted and honored to be part of the 5th Seoul Urban Food International Conference. My name is Nevin Cohen, and I'm an associate professor of health policy and management at the City University of New York School of Public Health, and I'm also the director of the CUNY Urban Food Policy Institute. Our institute aims to help cities create just, healthy, and resilient urban food systems. And before I begin my talk, I'd like to just explain a little bit more about what we do at the Institute. Our focus is on the critical issues facing urban food systems. So we focus our work on food security and nutrition. We also address resilience in the food system, how food systems can address environmental challenges, and how processes like urban planning and policy can strengthen community and regional food systems. We also have a program to address food labor, supporting low-wage food workers, because in cities like New York, the food sector is a huge part of the economy, and there are large numbers of workers in the food system, and they're an important way to increase food justice and food security in a city like as large as New York. We work on leadership training, and we help to empower food advocates. And CUNY is a huge university. We have 500,000 part and full-time students. And so a lot of our effort is on making CUNY's food environment a healthy food environment and on training CUNY students to be effective food advocates. Today, what I'm going to talk about are the multiple global food crises, not one crisis, that affects us today, and how we can address those crises, largely through innovations and policy development at the urban scale. I'd like to start by showing you some global statistics. These are from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. They're not my data, but they paint a picture that is important as context to show how significant hunger, food insecurity, and malnourishment are globally. This is data on the global prevalence of hunger. Hunger is the absence of sufficient food. It's what you feel in the belly when you go hungry. It is a visceral and critical state of being. And so this is an important statistic to be concerned about. 8% of the world goes hungry. The data globally masks huge disparities based on regional differences, and these are based largely on differences in income and wealth. And so you can see from this chart, 1 in 5 people in Africa are hungry, compared to 2.5% of the population in Northern America and Europe. So it's important to look at regional disparities in hunger, and also to understand the relationship between hunger and food insecurity. Food insecurity is a state in which people don't have sufficient money to buy all of the food or the types of food that they feel are appropriate for their households. It's a state of insecurity when people really don't know where the next meal is coming from. And globally, 17.6% of the population is moderately food insecure. That there are periods of time when people don't have enough money to buy the food that they need. 11.7% of the globe is severely food insecure, which means that they're having to give up meals so that their children can eat. That they need to skip meals across the week to make sure that they are subsisting. And so it's an important statistic to keep in mind when we think about ways to improve the nutritional status and health of the globe. Those global statistics also are masked by disparities that appear at the local scale. So in New York City, for example, we estimate that 12.5% of our population is food insecure. 1 in 5 New Yorkers, 20%, rely on federal food benefits, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, to pay for sufficient food for their households. But that 12.5% also masks disparities within New York City. So the Bronx, for example, has a much higher level of food insecurity than Queens and Staten Island. And these disparities are based on disparities in income and wealth that are based on racial and ethnic disparities and access to resources. The Bronx is more food insecure than other boroughs because it is populated by Black and Latinx people who, for a variety of reasons due to structural racism, have been disempowered, impoverished, and as a result are less able to afford sufficient healthy food for their households. When we look at levels of undernourishment that result from food insecurity and hunger, we see also that these levels have increased dramatically during the pandemic period. So these data are from 2019 to 2021. We see that global undernourishment has increased significantly in this period. It's important too to focus on vulnerable portions of the population. So if we look at the nutritional status of children under 5 years, an important period in the lifespan, globally, 1 in 5 young children are actually stunted, meaning their height is smaller than would otherwise be if they had sufficient nutrition. And 7% of the global population of children under 5 years suffers from wasting, serious malnourishment. Interestingly, 6% of children are overweight, and that's a function of poverty as well, because poverty and food insecurity often leads to the consumption of highly processed, unhealthy, but highly caloric food, which leads to overweight, obesity, and potentially later in life, negative health outcomes, particularly cardiovascular diseases. The cost of all of this is significant. And by some estimates, diet-related health costs in terms of mortality and morbidity due to non-communicable diseases of unhealthy diets amounts to some 1.3 trillion per year. The diet-related social costs, that is the cost to society of things like the greenhouse gas emissions from current agricultural and food systems and existing dietary patterns, is also substantial. By one estimate, 1.7 trillion per year. Others have estimated the potential annual savings in social costs if we were to shift from our existing diets to plant-based diets that might amount to 40 to 3/4% in those direct diet-related social costs. So when we talk about global food crises and not one crisis, what do we mean? One example that is in the news and on our minds every day is the war in Ukraine. And just that one example is so substantial in terms of the impact on undernourishment globally. By FAO's estimate, the impact of the war in Ukraine on the number of undernourished ranges from an additional approximately 10 million people to 15 or more million in a severe scenario. And these estimates were made at the early part of the war, and depending on the trajectory of the war, we hope it certainly ends as soon as possible. These impacts can be even more severe, and depending on decisions that Russia might make to blockade transportation and disrupt supply chains. And so, what can we do about this? We have not just the war in Ukraine, but larger, longer term changes due to things like climate change. I don't have time in this presentation to discuss the effects of climate change on food systems. I think most of the audience understands that those impacts are significant. They range from changes in yield due to changing weather patterns, droughts, and weather-related events. The changes, the expansion and movement of plant and animal diseases due to disease vectors moving across the globe as the climate changes. Physical disruptions in food supply chains due to weather events. Food price volatility resulting from all of these changes in yields and uncertainty about harvests. Migration of humans and changing demand as people migrate from drought-stricken areas that have been devastated by weather events, areas devastated by fires. And as those patterns of migration evolve, the need for food in different parts of the world will change. And as that demand changes, levels of food insecurity and malnourishment will increase. And finally, human disease vectors due to flooding, poor sanitation, water supply disruptions that increase in severity due to weather-related, climate-related weather events will have an effect on humans directly by affecting their nutrition due to gastrointestinal diseases. And as these diseases increase in frequency, both the direct effect on human health and the effect on nutrition as people's ability to absorb nutrients from the food they eat changes will be significant climate change related food system effects. So let's move from the scope of the problem, which, as you, I think, can appreciate from this presentation, very serious and very significant, to potential policy solutions. Although I've been working on these issues for many years, I'm at heart an optimist because I see changes that have emerged at the local scale that have replicated and scaled to larger policy interventions. So I think that there are potential solutions that we should nurture. Let me give you some examples based from my experience in New York City, but from cities and other scales of government globally. One type of intervention is to develop policies to shift our food supply chains to supply healthier diets. And that can occur in a lot of different ways. One is by developing stricter food standards. This could be done at the national level, but we find that cities have taken the initiative to develop standards for healthier food. New York City, for example, has really stringent food standards for public meals. This is an image on the screen of the New York City Department of Health's advertising that your public meals are healthier than ever. And the food standards in New York City do away with things like sugary sweetened beverages and require lower sodium, increased whole grains, more vegetables on the plate, and less fatty animal proteins. New York City has also taken the initiative to ban trans fatty acids, to reduce saturated fats and reduce added sugar in the food system for public meals. Informational regulations requiring information to consumers about the health impacts of the food that they may choose to buy is also an important strategy for both enabling consumers to make smarter choices, but also to encourage manufacturers to reformulate their products so that they aren't labeled as unhealthy. This image on the screen is an example of front of label warnings put on food in Chile. Mexico and other countries have adopted similar types of front of package warning symbols. Kellogg's is advertising that their sugary sweetened cereal is a source of energy, but the warning symbols in black and white on the front of the package show that they're high in calories and high in sugar. Nutrition fact labels can also be reformulated and redesigned to make them easier to understand by consumers. And companies have responded by reducing the sodium and sugar content in their foods, because advertising those nutrition facts is a barrier to consumers. It gives consumers pause in choosing what to buy. New York City has taken the lead in requiring chain restaurants to label their menus with a variety of data. There's a requirement for a high sodium label, a salt shaker warning on menus. There's sugar content labeling requirements, and New York City took the lead before the national government in the US adopted calorie labeling by requiring restaurants in New York City to post the calories of menu items. And national governments like Mexico have been successful in reducing sugary sweetened beverage consumption through soda taxes. And cities as well, like the city of Berkeley in the US, have adopted soda taxes to reduce the consumption of unhealthy sweetened beverages. An important effort that's just sort of gaining strength in the US and in the UK recently is the effort to limit or prohibit what we call predatory food marketing. Most people know the term targeted marketing. Companies engage in targeted marketing all the time to market their products to specific groups of consumers. Predatory food marketing reflects the practice of the food industry to market ultra-processed, unhealthy food to particularly vulnerable populations. Our institute has been doing research in New York City to track the marketing of unhealthy food in Black and Latinx communities throughout New York City, communities that also face disproportionate health risks as a result of unhealthy diets, are being marketed to by fast food industries and the ultra-processed food manufacturers. Examples of ways to deal with that come from the UK, which just recently adopted rules that restrict high-fat salt and sugar, HFSS products, in prime locations in retail stores. These regulations also ban volume promotions like the 3 for £4 advertisements that you see on the screen, and restrict digital marketing and advertising. Digital marketing is obviously one of the most pervasive and increasingly influential forms of marketing, and the EU has taken steps to address digital food marketing. And UK's effort has focused specifically on foods marketed to children who are especially vulnerable to advertisements. Young children have a harder time discerning what's true information and what's marketing information that they receive, and so are more vulnerable to advertisements that get them to eat sugary sweetened cereals or sugary sweetened beverages and other unhealthy food. New York City recently banned food advertisements from public property, and London recently banned them from the underground, from public transit. So there are a lot of efforts underway. New York State has a bill in the state legislature now to ban predatory marketing to children of unhealthy food. And so efforts can move forward to restrict marketing and therefore the consumption of unhealthy food by populations. The public plate has an important role to play in reshaping the food system and making food healthier. Cities and other subnational governments can take steps to redirect public food procurement to ensure that food is healthier in public food programs like school food. In the US, universal free school meals are increasing in popularity and through policy increasing across the United States. New York City adopted universal free school food for all students in the New York City school system, over 1 million children who eat 2 and sometimes more than 2 meals a day in their schools. For low-income children, school meals can be a huge part of their weekly nutrition, often accounting for more than 2/3 of the calories that they eat per day. New York City adopted the policy in 2019. During the pandemic, the U.S. Department of Agriculture expanded the availability of universal free school meals to all states, and many states adopted universal school food to feed kids who were really dependent on school food during the pandemic. And California recently made universal school meals permanent throughout the state. Another use of public food procurement to improve health and also address corollary issues in the food system, like environmental impacts of food on public health and climate change, comes from efforts to establish values-based food procurement. There's a program in the US that started in Los Angeles but has expanded to cities across the country called the Good Food Purchasing Program that requires cities that adopt the Good Food Purchasing Program to engage in values-based food procurement, buying local, humane, healthy, sustainable, and fairly produced food. And this means food that's nutritious, that's good for the environment, that supports fair wages for farm workers and other people in the food supply chain, that supports local and regional food, supporting local economies, and that is humane, that is fair for animals. What can cities do to address, for example, climate change? Many cities are adopting plant-forward policies for public food that's provided in public meal programs, and food purchased by the city for those meal programs. So one effort that's catching fire, that's increasing in popularity, are efforts to reduce meat in public meals, animal protein in public meals, like school food. In New York City, the city's school system, again, which provides meals to over 1 million kids, instituted something called Vegan Fridays, eliminating animal protein from the menus 1 day a week, and encouraging schools to be creative about meal preparation to encourage kids to enjoy meals that have other healthier, more climate-friendly proteins like beans and legumes and pulses. As you can see, this is not completely vegan. There's a big container of milk in the center of the plate on this image. That's because federal policy, USDA policy, requires school meals that are funded through the federal government to offer milk to students. And this is a big controversial issue now. Dairy farmers think that's important. Other nutritionists think that we can provide alternatives to milk in the school meal program, but that's an issue that's being hashed out currently. Implementing plant-based meals can also affect other public food programs. For example, New York City recently adopted a program in its public hospitals. The agency that runs the city's hospitals is called New York City Health and Hospitals, and they have started a plant-based meals by default program. So for all patients in the city's hospitals, the default meal on the menu will always be a plant-based meal, and patients can choose an animal protein for their meal, but this makes the default and the easy choice the healthier and healthier for climate change option. And we'll see how this program evolves over the course of the next year or two and see whether it really is successful. And hopefully will be expanded to other health institutions as well. Data is critical in ensuring that the food procured by cities is actually helping to address issues like climate change. New York City implemented an interactive website that gives advocates and other policymakers a view into the kind of food that the city procures and the impact of that food on CO2 emissions from the food system of New York City. This chart on the right is from the city's website that shows the total number of meals served and the food categories purchased by weight across different city agencies. And as you can see, dairy is the #1 food purchased by weight, and that is because of the milk served in the school meal program. The city also calculates and displays the estimated emissions by food type in metric tons of CO2 equivalent. So we can see that dairy is the biggest CO2 emitter in the food that the city purchases for public meal programs. Ruminant meats is another significant source of CO2 emissions in the city's food system. And what you can see from the bar chart below is the agencies that are purchasing food for public meals and their impact on climate change by agency. And so we see that the Department of Corrections is actually the biggest emitter of CO2 per 1,000 kilocalories by agency because they serve meat in many of their meals. And so this gives advocates and city officials a tool to know what types of meals to target, what types of food procurement to change in order to enable a city like New York to reduce its climate change impact by changing the food system. I want to end by suggesting that we can't solve nutritional problems, we can't solve the issue of the food system's impact on climate change without addressing upstream social determinants of health. And what do I mean by that? It means that in order to address hunger, food insecurity, malnourishment, and to transform the food system so that it's both fair, healthy, and resilient and enables cities to be more resilient to climate change, we need to address these bigger impacts. And that includes things like improving wages and working conditions of food laborers. The image on the left is from the successful Fight for 15 campaign that was waged across the US to ensure that fast food workers were paid a minimum wage of $15 per hour. The image on the right is the logo of an organization called Los Deliveristas Unidos, which has organized food delivery workers who work for app-based platforms like Uber Eats or Grubhub. And these are pervasive globally, and platform-based food delivery work is increasing worldwide. Food delivery workers in the US are considered independent contractors, not employees, which means that they have fewer rights than conventional employees, They don't get paid except for when they do their gigs, their delivery work. And so they have a lot of downtime during the day that they're not able to earn money. And they don't have the benefits of social wages like health benefits or benefits if they are injured on the job or time off from work for being sick. And so there's a big campaign now that has culminated in a proposal by the New York City government to establish a minimum wage for app-based or platform-based food delivery workers of approximately $25 per hour to account for the fact that they have a lot of downtime during the day and that they have to, as independent contractors, pay for their bicycles and other equipment. And so this is a really, I think, progressive effort to make sure that this segment of the workforce, which in New York City tends to be populated with immigrants and unskilled workers who depend on delivery work as their main source of income, to have a better quality of life and standard of living and to be able to put healthy food on the table at home. Increasing the social wage is also important. And that includes not just the higher minimum wage, but also things like universal health care and childcare, public or affordable housing for low-wage workers, free or low-cost higher education, both to enable people to get better jobs and to be able to then afford healthier food for themselves and their families later on in their lives. And for farm workers and farmers, equitable access to farmland so that we increase food sovereignty and enable more people to actually produce food. I will end there and look forward to taking questions during the Q&A session. So thank you again. I'm honored to be part of this conference, and I look forward to a further dialogue about these important issues.
Thank you very much. Professor Cohen just delivered a presentation. So he talked about the solutions, policy solutions to respond to climate change, and also the areas to improve, especially in the environment of low-income food workers. So thank you very much for your informative presentation. So I'd like to now move on to the second presenter. So he will talk about increasing food insecurity and urban food policy. I'd like to invite Mr. Filippo Gavazzani. He's the head of the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact Secretariat.
Good day to all the participants of the 2022 Seoul Urban Food System Conference. I am particularly delighted to participate also in this edition of the conference. During my presentation, I will go through briefly the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact and what our cities are doing to tackle the increasing food insecurity in cities. So, the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact is a global commitment of mayors that see food as an entry point to transforming their urban food systems. Is a tangible platform of continuous exchange and learn among cities, among mayors and city officers that choose their priorities in the food system transformation, and through the support of the Secretariat, we are building a more sustainable urban food system through 37 recommended action that can be clusters in 6 categories of the Milan Pact. So from governance to sustainable diets and nutrition, from social and economic equity, that is let's say the category, the most important category for this conference, to food production, food supply and distribution, and food waste prevention. These 37 recommended actions are accompanied by 44 indicators, a monitoring framework that we have developed together with FAO and RUAF to track the implementation of food policies and see the impact of our cities. The pact has been signed by 250 mayors from all over the world, with a good balance in the different continents, also in Asia Pacific. As you can see also from here, the pact represents more than 450 million citizens from all over the world, with the majority being in Europe. This is the steering committee of the Milan Pact. I would like just to mention that the city of Seoul is part of the steering committee, showcasing its leadership in promoting food policies, not just in Seoul, but supporting cities in Asia Pacific to implement innovative food policies. So I wanted to acknowledge this effort. What we do here from Milan, from the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact Secretariat, we are pushing food system transformation through several tools to support our cities and our mayors. So through meetings, bilateral or multilateral meetings, webinars, trainings, and this year, for example, in 2022, we organize a very extensive training devoted just to Asia Pacific officers from signatory cities. The two most important activities that we do to support cities are the organization of regional fora and global fora, and the organization of the Milan Pact Awards. The regional fora are moments in which mayors and city officers can move together on some specific issue in a 3 days intense exchange with also regional institution. For Asia Pacific, we have just organized within the G20 presidency of Indonesia, the first ever regional forum for Asia Pacific, and the issue was promoting food security through urban farming. So it's an issue connected with the theme of this conference. What we have been able to achieve is that through this G20 side event, we were able to include the issue of food security in the final recommendation of the EU20. So it was also an advocacy action towards the G20 leaders. Moving ahead, we have just organized in Rio de Janeiro the last global forum of the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, and the main issue was food to feed the climate justice, urban food solution for a fairer world. Also, this issue, as you can see, is connected to the main theme of the conference, and this means that the concern both at regional level in Asia Pacific and the global level are on food justice and food security. Moving ahead to this to another very important tool of knowledge transfer is the Milan Pact Awards. The Milan Pact Awards is an initiative of the City of Milan and the Caripol Foundation. And since 2016, we are basically asking to signatory cities to submit their most innovative food policies. An international jury of experts representing the academia, the international institution, NGOs, every year assess the impact and the innovation of these food policies and award the most innovative one. I also take the opportunity to acknowledge the great effort from Professor Nevin Cohen that served as a juror of this edition of the Milan Pact Awards. Thank you so much, Nevin. So you can see that in 2022, we had many practices from our signatory cities, and this show how cities are working, are committed to transform their food system, and at the same time that cities are committed to share their food system to advance together. In this edition, 2022 edition, we gathered 37 practices in the category of social and economic equity. What we have observed is that the long-term consequences of the global pandemic were extremely visible in the practice submitted under this category, with many cities detecting rising levels of poverty and food insecurity. What we have learned from cities is how wide the range of responses cities can bring to tackle the food access. So, for example, food vouchers and direct food distribution, but also programs to incentivize healthier food choices, innovative technologies to give businesses opportunities to low-income community, and mostly in Europe, I would say, the empowerment of existing food aid network. So I've mentioned that we have every year a winner city, and the winner city of the social and economic equity of this year is the city of Rourkela in India, with the project Ekul Mandi. So I would like to go through now to this a little bit to this awarded practice. Every year in India, 30% of fruit and 44% of vegetable are wasted. And this is mainly due to inadequate and decentralized cold storage facilities. Gaps in this storage chain have also led to distressed sale by farmers, low incomes, and long waiting period in scorching heat. Food contamination as well, increased water, soil, and energy consumption. Rourkela has come up with an idea of installing solar energy-based decentralized cold storage facilities in various markets of the city. So vendors can store their produce at a minimal cost of 0.3 euros per kilo. The project also focuses on women empowerment. So these vegetable banks are run by Society of Women. 5 cold storages in different major markets of the cities are in process, catering to around 105,000 vendors and 500,000 population as a beneficiary. The major outcome of the Ekul Mandi is that senior citizens, for example, through a dedicated app, and also physically challenged citizens of Rourkela are now able to order and receive commodities, healthy commodities like fruit and vegetables are their doorsteps. Then also small and marginal vendors, especially women, saw a reduction in distress selling of their commodities. This has unlocked their potential to sell more, expand their customers, and consequently produce better commodities. At the same time, the cold room with solar panel have the power, of course, to reduce CO2 emission. And finally, another important outcome is the reduction in vegetable wastage at the city level. Apart from this practice, these winning practices, the evaluation committee of the awards recognizes also 3 special mentions under the social and economic equity category. These cities, awarded cities, are the city of Melbourne, Los Angeles, and Wrocław. I won't go through the beautiful practice of Melbourne, that is the community food relief. because the city decided to include food security as a key health and well-being focus area. We did the city council plan 2021-2025. I think that my colleague Maria can present after me this practice. So I will then, and congratulations are in order, and I will go through the practice of Los Angeles, that is Healthy Neighborhood Market Network Program. So we start from the problem in Los Angeles that there are many communities with limited access to fresh food, so communities that are designated as food desert by the US Department of Agriculture. In 2019, Mayor Garcetti released the LA Green New Deal, that is a comprehensive roadmap to protect the environment, strengthen the economy, and build a more equitable future. This Green New Deal has a dedicated chapter to supporting sustainable and equitable food system, including important targets to ensure that all low-income citizens can live within half a mile of fresh food by 2035. So to achieve this target, the city funds this Healthy Neighborhood Market Network program directly through the city budget. The program is run by the LA Food Policy Council, that is a no-profit organization, serving as a backbone organization for over 400 agencies. That includes community members, farmers, small business owners, restaurants workers, and food advocates. The program aims to increase food access in designated food deserts by empowering small shop like convenience shop, liquor shop, and store owners with education, technical assistance, and providing store upgrades to bring healthy food option and fresh produce to their communities. And then, of course, as well, providing significant and economic and social justice benefits. What are the major outcomes? So the partner store of the program are supported, and they are supported to close the gap between low-income families and fresh food products. The program also supports sustainable and equitable food system by encouraging greater access to fresh produce and other healthy options to low-income community, also reducing CO2 emission coming from the local food supply chain. Finally, I would like to draw your attention to the policy from the city of Wrocław in Poland that is called Refugees in the Food System of a Medium-Sized Cities. So in February, the war among Russia and Ukraine took place, and the exodus of citizens in Ukraine started. According to the data, more than 3 million refugees from Ukraine arrived in Poland, of which more than 180,000 chose Wrocław, which is a small-sized city. So in April, 23% of city's residents were Ukrainian. And of course, the majority of them need support. Most aid activities were carried out, making sure that every adult, every child had access to enough food and water. These events contributed to the spontaneous creation of a specific and efficient network of connection in scope of securing access to food for refugees. This was possible thanks to a strong social capital supported by the city in the last years. Wrocław was indeed already have an efficient working social case structure. And thanks to this, it was possible to launch 3 large food distribution points in the city, run by the city and other non-governmental institutions. In just 3 months, the city were able to provide 1.3 million meals in these three points of distribution. They had also 2,000 volunteers that were permanently involved. The food was purchased by the government and also by donors, by food banks, and also was prepared by gastronomic schools that were involved in the program. The economic impact of the preparation of these meals were unexpected, of course. So it was an unplanned expenditure. In the city budget was 2 million euros. The situation contributed also to map this network, this informal network of support, and to identify the strengths and the weaknesses of this network. And of course, this is a lesson learned for create a more efficient, let's say, network of support to people in need. So I conclude my presentation with these 4 cases from our signatory cities. Also mention that if there are some cities connected, I'm sure there will be in the conference. If you want to join our global commitment of mayor, please reach the secretariat out to this to the contact that you see in the slide. We will be very happy to support your city's effort toward food system transformation. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. He talked about this innovative system for the food and the efforts and also the education and the training programs about the food insecurity and the policy alternatives. Thank you for sharing that. And that was a great thank you. And moving on, now we will hear from the Vice Director of the Song Won-gyu from the Research Institute for Agriculture and Peasant Policies, who will present on the food crisis, food security, and role of the municipal governments. Hello, everyone. My presentation will be about the food crisis and food security and roles of the municipal governments. I am Song Won-gyu from Research Institute of the Agriculture and Peasant Policies. I would like to thank the Seoul metropolitan government for giving me this opportunity. It's really important time to think about this food crisis, and I'll talk about the strategies of the municipal governments in this crisis and what the Korean government has done to come up with the policies to address this food crisis. And the key part of my presentation will be about what the municipal governments can do and do more to guarantee the food security. So when it comes to the food crisis, for sustainability of the food, it's really important work that we need to do. And in this crisis, there are so interconnected and intricate relationship between these governments. And to change this food system, there are many constraints. And in this regard, for the municipal governments, they can try some new approaches under the current food system, which is at a more global level, and they are now making very active efforts, and this could be seen as new municipalism and also the municipal foodscape. And cities are now being rebuilt as key space for new food governance, which connect the civil society and the private actors and the municipal governments. So they developed these strategies, and to expand this food system, they are now building diverse networks. And this is the global trend. And along with this global trend of the new networks, and what's common is this trend. And in Korea, now let me show you the journey over the years the Korea has taken. It first started from the private and the civic community, and now it has shifted to the public sector, and the governments started to take actions. First, we had this rural exodus, and there was a good movement for organic farming, and the consumer cooperatives played a key role, and now the consumer cooperatives were created, and along with the trend with this school food and school meal, the eco-friendly and the free school meal was adopted and expanded across the nation to the junior high and high schools, and now the municipal governments started to play a leading role in this food movement, and I will cover more later. And this local food plan has been built as a framework for the municipal governments, and they are now playing bigger roles. This is the case of the Seoul Metropolitan City Government, and here you can see they have the school meal support ordinance, and that was the start. And now that has an important role, and we had the voting of the public population, and with that they set up this eco-friendly food distribution center, and they built the network and good relationship with the city and province and the city government, and that was the phase 2. And after that, in the phase 3, moving beyond the food for schools and students, they are now working for all the citizens to provide the quality and good food. So they built this food master plan, and to support the master plan, they developed the ordinances. And along with this, for the school meal and the good food supply was also expanded by having this public meal support center. And this trend has been a journey taken by or led by the Seoul City government. And as you can see in the graph, now there are about 120 school support or school meal support centers are in operations. So all this trend started by the school meals and the processing and supply and consumption and disposal are now being covered by the municipal governments. It is really circulatory cycle, and they develop the plans. So at the city and district level, they built the basic ordinances, and it was started in 2019. And as of 2020, 50 city governments built a plan, and for the metropolitan or regional city and provinces, in 2017, only one had the plans, but now 14 such governments developed the plan. And also the Seoul city government started this whole planning, and to support that with the legislation, many municipality governments formulated the ordinances. So 50 cities or districts or 14 metropolitan cities or provinces developed this legal framework in terms of the ordinances. And as you can see on the screen, there was a huge growth, and it's really a surprising trend for many other countries. And they, or the municipal governments, came up with this expanding formulation of the legal framework. But is it really corresponding to the quality improvement? And that is the question that we have to look into. So we have achieved this quantitative growth and frameworks and legislation, but we have to now think about the quality. of the system where the citizen and all the stakeholders are engaged, but we are not there yet. So to assess the status, the government has come up with this local food index, and under the plan for different sectors, we are assessing these categories, different categories of the local food. And there are 6 different grades, and you can see the differences depending on the regions and provinces. And there are some municipal governments where the progress is too low and they cannot even make the assessment. So in the future, to more effectively implement these plans to guarantee citizens' rights to the food, how can we achieve this goal of more circular and effective food supply? So what are the roles of the municipal governments? As a researcher for the past decade, I looked into the implementation of the food programs and cooperation between the private and the public sectors. And I'll share with you my observations and my thoughts. For now, at home and abroad, this is the food system, and it is exposed to many vulnerabilities due to the systematic crisis. So now it is really important point in time to tackle this structural crisis. So I will take an example of the Seoul city to highlight the need of enhanced roles to be played by the municipal governments. So for the Seoul city, the school meal program was very successful. For Seoul city governments, it doesn't have much production sites because it's a huge and large city. So it worked with 9 districts to get the supply of the food. So the producers or associations or the cooperatives made their own network, and they supplied the food needed by the schools in the Seoul city. So Seoul city government sourced or procured this food from the local areas, and in the past it was outsourced to the cities, but to increase the level of the public goods, they also built this Seoul eco-friendly distribution center, and they supply the food to schools, and it was done by the Seoul city government so that all the city people could enjoy the benefits of this program in an equal manner. So they worked closely with the farmers and their cooperatives in the local areas as a part of the Seoul City Master Plan. And across the program, they could get the local supply of the food, and they could have more organized system of the food supply and demand. And Seoul city government helped them by purchasing the food supplied in the region. So they built this cooperative and mutually beneficial system, but it was not enough to cover the demands of the 25 districts in Seoul City by just connecting or linking one supply center with this one district. So in terms of the quantity and quality, they could not satisfy the whole demands. And I'll cover more in the later slides. And the cooperation between the municipal governments is important, but also it was bounded by these local boundaries. So there was one critic. And so for the Seoul city government, with the public and the school meals, they have built this public food system, and they are now thinking about how to expand that into a greater program, more stronger program. So one idea was to leverage this food supply center and also make this food system more accessible for the public in terms of supplying the food under the food program for the schools, but also for broader scope of the facilities like the child care centers and also the hospitals, or even community kitchens or shared kitchens or shared fridges as a way to connect this good supply of the food with the demand. And the second point is about in expanding the network of the local food supply. First, they can achieve the higher level of the services for the child care. And also the government is now providing the integrated child care service. So we may link the program with the local food supply, and there were many researches conducted, like the community kitchen or a shared kitchen or the shared fridge could be one way to make the food more accessible to the public from like across whole life cycle, from the child when they were children and when they were youth and adults. So all age groups of the public can access these different food sources. And it could be also connected with the integrated child care service program. And that is what we need to consider in the future. And with the programs, the municipal governments need to take an important point into consideration at a national level to achieve the sustainability. Now the current system is more focused on the single crop farming and productivism, and that can be or better be turned into more local focused system. And here governments can play an important role. So the municipal governments for the current plan are only limited at a district or the province level. So we need to have cross or intergovernmental cooperation between the cities and the rural areas, and that will be really important point. For the Seoul city government in particular, it doesn't have much production site, so the cooperation with the local producers will be really important. And along the way, unlike the past, this food plan and the food strategy can be supported by the private and the public sectors, and the cooperation between them will be really important. So the public and the private governance, and also from the private sector, there will be many different stakeholders. So we may build some platform for these multiple stakeholders, and we can incorporate that into the government strategies, which is not bound by the geographical limitations. And last but not least, what would be the most important factors in guaranteeing the rights of the public to food? And we need to shift our paradigm. That is really basic rights to food. As I mentioned before, we can formulate the ordinances to specify the obligations of the municipal governments. And by doing that, the governments can implement their public programs and the policies. So this legislation and the framework and the programs must be put in place. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Song. We are able to listen to learn from him, and he talked about municipality and the policies and how the policies have to be coordinated with the other parties. Thank you very much for your presentation. So after 3 presentations, now I'd like to move on to the discussion. For the case presentation and panel discussion, I'd like to introduce our chair, Professor Chargyu Kim of Korea University. On behalf of Filippo, that we are privileged to have Anasha. Now I'd like to give my microphone to Mr. Kim, Professor Kim. Nice to meet you. I am Chagyu Kim from Korea University. I am the chair of the second session, so we're going to talk about the real cases of the cities. From YouTube, I can see that the questions are coming up, so we're going to have some time to cover those questions. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce the speakers.
와 있겠죠? 네, 그다음에 from Melbourne, Anastasia, Milan 참여해 주셨고요. 그다음에 내빈 교수님은 잠깐 나가셨나요?
And do we have Professor Cohen? We'll have some questions from the audiences. So,
are you there? Do you hear me, Maria? Anastasia? Okay, good. All right. 그래서 여러 토론자들 외국의 국내외 여러 토론자들
so we're privileged to have speakers from home and abroad.
그 토론의 근거가 될 수 있는 두 개의 발표, 사례 발표를
So for us to have discussions, I'd like to have two presentations. And first of all, I'd like to introduce Director of Food Policy Division of Seoul Metropolitan Government. And she will talk about, she has done a great job in terms of food policy making, and she will introduce Seoul food policies. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Chun Jin-suk, Director of Food Policy Division of the Seoul Metropolitan Government. Due to the global abnormal climate changes and also the COVID-19 that the world is witnessing an unprecedented difficulty, this leads to the problems like vulnerable groups in food access, and especially Seoul, since it's densely populated, that it is critical for us to make sustainable food policies that are matching the characteristics of the city. So today I'd like to talk about the Seoul policies to deal with such difficulties. Food is divided into supply, distribution, and consumption. So in each process that there are some things to take care. And because of the abnormal climate changes that we are witnessing, that the supply difficulties, and also due to the increasing food prices that we are seeing, the inequality issues, and also the food safety crisis due to food poisoning. So we are making sure that the Seoul citizens can make food available, they can have access to good food easily. The Seoul city is working and focusing on 4 areas. The first one is providing customized food, and the second is empowering citizens, and the third is creating a healthy food environment, and number 4 is establishing safe food systems. The first one, today I'd like to talk about customized food policies, and especially this is targeting students and young students and pregnant women and marginalized old generations. First of all, I'd like to introduce the first project, which is a school support project. Starting from this year, that we are providing all complimentary meals from kindergarten to the 3rd graders, and by shortening the food distribution channels, that we are delivering eco-friendly food ingredients to school. And also we have increased the eco-friendly ingredients to 70%. We don't want to have children or elderly people limiting from getting good food. So we're providing environment where that they can easily get good food, and especially for elderlies who have high risks can get support from us because we pay visits to them. And also for low-income pregnant women and also the young children and are receiving supplementary education and counseling. And also, we are providing 2 times of fruit as part of Let's Eat Fruit Kids. And so, as part of the program that we are offering fruits, more than 30% of the population in Seoul are single-person households, and 40% of them are young generations living alone. So we are also providing support for the young people. And one of the programs is new use of food ingredients. That means that the ingredients are not necessarily good in terms of the value because it's close to the expiry date. However, in terms of nutrients, it has no problem. And the second is I'd like to introduce how we are empowering citizens. So we are supporting we're supporting global health action guidelines because we'd like to cultivate good diet. So we are providing easy to follow guidelines so that our citizens can consume more vegetables and fruits and refrain from consuming animal fat. Also, we have established comprehensive dietary support centers across Seoul in 25 districts. So for young children that we are providing programs so that they can have balanced diets, and also for adults that we are providing healthy food experience program. So our citizens can experience low sugar and low salt programs, and also we are visiting kindergartens and child care centers. And also we are providing a healthy food environment, and one of the program is food scanner. So in the cafeteria of Seoul City government, every Friday we are providing diet, planetary diet. And when the Seoul City government officials finish their meals, that we are measuring the waste. And another program is providing child food management support center for the organizations or schools that don't have proper nutritionists, that we are providing support to provide hygienic environment for children's care facilities. And securing safety in food is one of the important priorities. So the Seoul City government is working hard to provide safe environment. We have strengthened monitoring in each process, in each food stage. And also we have made sure that the delivery food facilities are managed in a clean environment. So by working multiple policies that we are making sure that we provide good food environment to our citizens. So we'll make sure that all networks are connected well without any loopholes or gaps. So we are using databases. So based on the data that we are collecting food, and based on the monitoring and science-based data that we have established a system. And also we'll continue to develop capabilities of our professionals. So as you can see, Seoul City is committed to making a city that is providing a sustainable food city system, and we'll continue to do our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a great presentation, and we could learn about the food policies of Seoul City government. Actually, Seoul City has been already under the Milan pact. They had this urban and rural program, and they won the award for the efforts. And they're working hard to build the sustainable food system. And for this food policy division, including Ms. Chung and many others, have been working really hard. And thank you for that. Next, we will go straight to the city of the Melbourne's case, beautiful city. And Maria Plakarakis will make a presentation. Please go ahead. Floor is yours.
wonderful listening to all the speakers. I just want to firstly acknowledge and pay respects to the traditional owners of the land we govern, the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung and Boonwurrung communities of the Eastern Kulin Nation, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I also acknowledge all the Indigenous communities around the world and the people who are struggling at the moment wherever they are. And we've talked about them a lot today. So in Australia, I just want to set the scene. There's 3 levels of government. So we have a federal government and they govern all of Australia. And they really pay attention to Medicare, defence, immigration and foreign policy. They look at our tax system, for example. Then we have state territory parliaments, and there's 8 of them across Australia. And then there's about over 537 local councils, and City of Melbourne is a local council. So we have responsibility for sewerage, town planning, local roads, rubbish collection, and we work with our stakeholders to look at all sorts of social issues, of which food security is one of them. For the Greater Melbourne, we've got 10,000 square kilometres, where our population is 4.9 million. We have people from all around the world who speak
Maria,
over 200.
I'm sorry. I think you're not sharing your PPT.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Would you please go over and do what you can do?
Yeah, sure.
Please share your monitor screen. Yeah.
Oh, I'm shocked I'm not doing that properly for you.
No worries.
Just
okay.
1 minute.
Still, it's not working properly, so please.
Can you see it?
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's good. So you're almost there. That's
we
better,
did this
but
really,
could you kind of like
we did this very well at the.
Yeah.
We did this.
No,
very
it's
well.
not working. Do it again.
Okay, it's just 1 minute. I'm really sorry about this.
It happens, yeah.
Where is the presentation?
Can I try it again? Yeah. Share your PPT.
Just, for some reason, it shut down on me. That's what's happened. So I will just start it up again.
그러면 여기서 띄울 수가 있을까요, 혹시?
Okay.
For some reason, your screen is not shared, so maybe we can do here.
Yep, I can. I think I've got it now. Can you see that?
Oh, wait, hold a second. I think it's, yeah, now it's better. Okay, so.
Okay.
Yes.
So
That's
everybody,
perfect,
I've just
perfect,
acknowledged.
yes.
Okay.
So
I've just acknowledged our.
Try to start from the very first page. Go
Yep.
bit faster, quicker than
Sure.
normal. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, now.
So if you look at this page here, there's over 537 councils across Australia, and City of Melbourne is one of those. I'm going to skip these 3. Okay. So City of Melbourne every year collects what we call social indicators surveys, and we monitor food insecurity in our city. And as you can see, in 2018, it was 26.2% of the population reporting food insecurity. And then steadily over the pandemic years and into 2021, it went up to 33.3%. So that's 1/3 of our population were reporting food insecurity, which was a really big shock to our councillors and our Lord Mayor. And we measure that very similar to what presenters have spoken today. In a Western country, we measure it in terms of people worried about running out of food, skipping meals, ran out of food, or people actually reporting that they're food insecure. So the councillors and our Lord Mayor made a decision that we needed to include a priority to focus on food insecurity. So they made the decision to put in a major initiative in our council plan to develop and deliver initiatives and programs that will provide food relief to vulnerable members of our community and improve local food production. So that became a real priority over the last couple of years. And the overarching document, which speaks to food insecurity and the work that we do to deliver programs around food, is our Food City policy, which is this particular policy. So there's 5 themes: a strong food secure community, healthy food choices for all. And when we talk about healthy food choices, the Victorian government has a healthy food choices program. And I'm pleased to say that some of the work that we've done historically since 2012 has supported the development of that particular guidelines. And that program has gone into hospitals and into schools and is encouraged more broadly. And City of Melbourne has worked with our recreation centres in particular to look at improvement of food programs, the nutritional content of food. We have also this year decided to look at our procurement policies and how we can actually change what food we're delivering in terms of their nutritional factor within our council facilities. One of the key elements that we needed to understand was what was happening. Why are people food insecure? So we decided to sample and research 200 community members who've been food insecure over the last 3 years. And we spoke to food relief providers to understand exactly what was happening. And this is what we discovered. So we discovered that in our municipality, 38% of the community in the central CBD area of Melbourne were reporting food insecurity. That's quite a high proportion for our community. And we were also wanted to know who was food insecure. And through that process, we learned that people sleeping rough, people living in social housing, renters and homeowners who are experiencing economic hardship, international students, our Indigenous community, women, some of them who have been experiencing family violence, and refugees coming into the city and coming into Australia who have entered Victoria and are living in our city. So this is what we found out through our research. And over the pandemic, what did we do to actually help people? So we enabled flexibility of different models of food relief. So anything that we believed traditionally, we decided not to put too many rules around how we could help people. And we really relaxed a lot of our traditional regulations. So we came up with a food voucher program for our international students. We opened up our community halls for meal distribution. We purchased long life and frozen meal products to give out to people so they could store it. We put together living food boxes so community could grow their own food. And we worked in partnership with food relief providers to transform our buildings and car parks into hamper packing and delivery operations. So this was during the pandemic. And we also activated fresh food markets. And we also made available grants for the purchase of PPE and for the safe transportation and distribution of food. So there's some of the initiatives that we put in place over the pandemic. During that time, with that research, we put together our community food relief plan. And this is our first step to planning for a food secure city. So we needed to deal with the urgent need, what was happening now. And there were 6 principles that we came up with through our research. So we know that we can't do it alone. We have to collaborate. We needed to think about food equity, making sure that the human rights declaration and the Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights was factored into it to make sure that there was food access for all in our community, looking at dignified access. So the community told us they didn't necessarily, many of them don't like receiving hampers. They prefer the food vouchers that they can go and do their shopping and purchase culturally appropriate food because of all the different languages and the different communities that live in our city. They wanted to be able to go out and purchase their own food, cook their own food, prepare their own food, and create meals that might last them for, 2 to 3 weeks in freezers themselves. We wanted to, enabling environments are really important, looking at sustainable solutions that we could reduce food waste and look at the circular economy. And we wanted to continue the evidence-informed processes. So we're working very closely with our food relief providers to monitor demand and looking at measures around how we might do that. Other speakers today have spoken about welfare, and we certainly have people who are living below the poverty line, and we've had a change in government in Australia, and we've just had another election where we've kept the local government, the Victorian government, and City of Melbourne has been very strongly advocating to increase payments to above the poverty line, so welfare payments to communities so that they can manage their circumstances and their life, and also increasing ongoing funding for affordable housing. So they're our platform to advocate very strongly to broader government bodies at the moment. So there are 17 activities in this plan, and I'm just going to show you a few. So we developed a community food map. So this is an interactive map where all the food relief providers gave us their details, and we plotted them on a map, and any service and any community member can actually open up this map and choose the type of food service that they're interested in, and they can actually then go in and visit the centre and collect the meals that they're interested in. The food that's offered in these sites is free, and anybody living in the City of Melbourne can attend, and anybody who's visiting our city, we're not going to discriminate. If people need food, they can come and collect food. We're also now working with Food Bank. They have a wonderful truck, and this, you can see the truck here, and there's 8 sections of the truck which have vegetables on one side and fruit on the other side, and we pick the most vulnerable community members, and we can go to those areas and those regions, and the community from the services, they collect a voucher and they can go and collect food for free. So the truck feeds 200 families with over 2,500 kilograms of fresh fruit and vegetables. Families can take away 15 kilos of food per family. And it's a removal truck size, and it takes, it sits in a car park and people can come and collect their food. It's run once a month. And it's also used as an engagement tool. So sometimes other services are with the truck. So if people want to talk about other issues that they're experiencing, they're able to talk to these services and get further support. There's also a really big mobile bus. It's like a supermarket, and people can go in one door and get the foods that they want, and then go out the other door. So it's like a small supermarket that goes to the local communities. It's 20 metres long, so you need quite a large space to put that there. We've also just provided funding to run the community grocer food market. So community members can go to this market. The food at this market is 30% cheaper than what you will find in a supermarket. So anyone can go and have a look at what's available. We do look at the different areas across the city and try to cater the markets to the needs of the cultural community. So, we might have different ethnic origins who prefer eggplants. So we'll make sure the different food is available to them. So as you can see, we're trying to come up with models, not necessarily one model. We're trying to come up with different ways that we can support the community and reach out to the community and provide food for all. So what else are we investigating at the moment? We're looking at how community can go to local libraries to collect food. So we know that there's programs where there's fridges in libraries, and you can go to the desk and you can pick up a book from the library, but you can also pick up food. We're looking at broader food voucher programs in our neighbourhood centres, in our childcare centres, where people can collect food vouchers and go shopping and purchase their own food. We're also doing some research to understand food growing in urban settings at the moment. and we're going to connect with an organisation called Grow It Local. And Grow It Local is it's a social enterprise where they offer seed programs, and community can come and collect seeds, and they're taught how to grow their own food. And community members who are already doing wonderful community services in relation to food distribution, they're able to tap into Grow It Local and tell the community what they're doing, and the community can find out a little bit more about them and link in with them. So this particular program is trying to make what is invisible visible, because we know out there in the community, many people, many normal citizens, we're talking about citizenship here and citizenry, we know that they're doing really interesting things, but we don't know where they are. So Grow It Local is a forum to be able to tell the community, come and tell us what you're doing. So that's really important that we're exploring that. We're also reviewing and refreshing our food policy, and that's really exciting, and there will be a focus on food security there. And then we're also looking at auditing our council facilities. So we have 69 kitchens, which are council-owned kitchens across the municipality. We've audited 15 of them, and those 15 are larger kitchens which are in the different parts of the city. And we're looking at how we might open those up for community use and how we might pivot their use during times of crisis. And of course, we're trying very hard to measure what we're doing and looking at indicators more broadly. So we're looking at social indicators, governance indicators, environmental indicators, waste measures, financial sustainability. And our ultimate goal is to make sure that people are food secure, that they have healthy options, and that we have a thriving food system. So we are a member of the Milan Food Policy Pact, which is a wonderful organisation. We are also partnering with Healthy Cities to deliver the food policy. And we're really clear that, we're working towards zero hunger, that, we want to reduce inequality, and we're partnering to further our goals through the Sustainable Development Goals. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much. Excellent, Maria. Good job. 마리아 멜보른 사례를 기반으로 해서
Thank you for sharing the Melbourne's case. And in time of the crisis, she shared about the social inequality and the food insecurity. And thank you for sharing that. And when we are having this whole crisis, the city government and the civic society and the communities and the public need to work together. Collaboration is really important. Thank you for sharing that. And we heard the two presentations, and we will now move on to the discussion of the experts.
I'd like to invite Mr. Hwang.
PPT 발표하실 건가요?
Do you have your PPT presentation? No? Okay. So we were able to listen to the presentation based on your case studies. So we checked policy directions in Seoul and Melbourne, and it was a very good one. We were able to learn from your presentations. Your presentation created great resonance. So we learned a lot from you, and during the COVID-19 that we saw that how vulnerable our public food system is. Against this backdrop that we were able to see that the health food system is causing problems, especially in the vulnerable families. So this has given us the directions, especially in 5 areas, the areas that we need to tackle the vulnerability. So the first message I'd like to give you is about local food system. There have been many discussions. There are different stakeholders, and the discussions are all complex. So when it comes to local food system, that we need to have basic guidelines. that everyone, all stakeholders can agree. So Milan Food Policy Pact can be adopted as basic guidelines. So based on such guidelines that we can reformulate our current food system. And second is from the perspective of local food system, we need to find out the urgent issues. And I think it is important that we provide care for the citizens throughout entire their life. Because throughout their life cycles, our citizens should not be fallen into the trap of vulnerability or insecurity. Since we have found out insecurities in the food system, that we need to find ways to complement the vulnerabilities, so we can find answer in caring and supporting each other. And the third one is, I believe that the food system should be empowered through citizens, participants. Also, Director Zhang mentioned that. Also, Professor Cohen mentioned the empowering the community. I think it's important that the citizens need to understand the importance of food system. So we need to make a framework, and sometimes we need to make policies, and also the policies that they can encourage. And I think it will help citizens to have better literacy on the food system. And the next one is about pushing ahead the framework. So Milan Pact Award is also emphasizing that the food governance, the number one is food governance. So to enhance the efficiency of the local food system, that we can work with the existing food citizens committee in Seoul, which we'd like to boast around the world. I think the city has to work closely, and also the farmers. So coexistence, co-prosperity should be the key word. Seoul City has worked closely and very hard to provide fresh ingredients to the city to achieve win-win between the city and also the urban area. Therefore, I think these 5 keywords are the things we have to remember. And before I close, I'd like to emphasize one thing. While going through the COVID-19, that we have realized the vulnerability of the food system from the external forces. So I think it is important that we enhance our resilience, and how we're going to enhance resilience is an important issue to consider. For us to solve issues, we need to find a source of resilience. And I think the source lies in the farmers. Through food, we can find resilience in our society. And I look forward to your continuous hard work. Thank you. You just mentioned 5 keywords. Now I'd like to give the microphone to Ms. Kim.
And please. First of all, I'd like to comment on the cases of the Seoul and the Melbourne cities. Thank you for the really great presentations, and I'd like to say thank you for these insightful presentations. I'd like to make 3 points. First, I'd like to talk about the food at the international and national and the community and family level. It's a really important part, and across the supply and distribution and consumption, it's now circulatory system, and at different levels, the policy interventions and the actors of the policy interventions could vary. So there are some factors that can cause the food insecurity. And first, we need to define the factors and who are most vulnerable in terms of setting the targets and the goals of the food policies. So the food system is a series of the processes from the production, supply, and distribution, and also purchase and the consumption, as was pointed out in the presentation of Ms. Kim. And in case of Seoul City, which is a large urban area where there's no production sites, the distribution and the purchase would be the processes where the government can intervene, and cities needs to be prepared, and it should be aware of the risks that may be caused for the food security when the public purchases the food. So the whole crisis could be about the lower accessibility, the physical, digital, and geological access. For example, there's now, no food, groceries or the restaurants, or they are locked because of lockdown. They couldn't access them, or they could not move, and they have like the non-face-to-face classrooms, and they couldn't go to school. And when they have to rely on the online platform, they may not be able to have the full access. And in the process of the purchase of the food, one crisis could be like the economically vulnerable people may not be able to purchase food. And as you can see from these different factors and the cases, we need to make sure that people will have the right level of the geographical, physical, digital, and economic access. And we have to identify which groups are the most vulnerable. And as was mentioned from the opening remarks, we first need to think about who are the vulnerable groups in terms of the food crisis. And second, we need to think about how we can support the food. And the Melbourne city had this flexible model, and it was a really interesting case. There could be different ways to support the food for the vulnerable people. We may procure the actual food ingredients, or we may deliver the food or meals, prepared meals to the vulnerable groups, or it could be in voucher or the subsidies, or it could be cash or coupons. So it could be different types, like a prepared meals or food ingredients or the vouchers or cash, and different options have different like pros and cons. So we need to consider what would be the most effective and the right support for the group. So we need to understand why they could not have the full access to food, and their capabilities and their conditions for cooking or preparing meals, and their digital accessibilities when we decide the most and optimal support options for different groups. And this is also related to the criteria for selecting the people who will get the food relief. And my last point is, closing my comments, to make sure that we have zero food insecurity. That could be our ideal goal. And the local communities need to think about the goal. And as we could see from this COVID-19 pandemic, we saw the increase of the people who are exposed to the food insecurity, and the food system of the municipal governments had some problems or challenges in supporting the vulnerable groups. So to build the effective food relief system, we need to think about the potential and the possible disaster scenarios in the future, and we need to predict what could happen for our food system. And by doing that, we can be better prepared and better respond to this food crisis and also disasters that may happen unexpectedly. Thank you.
감사합니다.
Thank you very much.
마지막 부분이 좀 이렇게 마음에 와 닿네요.
I think the last point was quite touching while going through the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, by witnessing the climate change, that we have realized that the food system is very important, that we need to prepare thoroughly for such disasters. Thank
Nevin,
you.
you're here, right? Hi.
Do we have Professor Cohen here?
Okay, good. 왜냐하면 굉장히 많은 질문들이
Yes, thank you for joining us. We have many questions coming up from the online YouTube. And although I have many questions, I'd like to ask each one of you. And the first question goes to Professor Cohen. During your presentation, we were able to see that the plant-based diet provided in a hospital in New York. Can you please share some achievements? What are the achievements that you have obtained from the program? And the second question is, are there any oppositions from the dietary or the farmers, I mean the animal farmers, if you go toward the plant-based diets, any oppositions that you face? So that is the first question. To Professor Cohen, please.
Yes, good morning from New York City. The program has just begun, so it is being evaluated, but we don't have results in terms of patient health. The New York City has adopted a food as medicine program in the city hospitals. The plant-based diet as the default diet is just one component of that. Food as medicine also includes prescription fruit and vegetable programs where doctors prescribe meals and give vouchers for patients to be able to buy fruits and vegetables to improve their diets. It also includes medically tailored meals that are specific to medical conditions and this plant-based diet approach. So we will need at least 1 year to know whether this has had a material impact on patient health, but there is evidence from other previous programs that have been implemented in other cities and in New York City that these diets can help alleviate problems like those caused by diabetes. And our mayor has famously talked about his personal movement to a plant-based diet and his reversal of a diabetes diagnosis himself. But I think the evidence needs to be really gathered about whether these programs have significant effect on the health and well-being of patients. In terms of conflicts with farmers, that has been a major issue in New York, both as a result of the decision to move more school meals away from animal-based protein. Farmers have said, and there's truth to this, that animals are an important part of agriculture, and that rather than simply moving to vegetarian or vegan meals, we need to have a more holistic view of agriculture and include meat and dairy. So it's very controversial. Obviously, regenerative farms have livestock, but most of the dairy and meat that New York City purchases for its meals come from commercial or industrial producers, where the ecological basis of food production is not critical. And so I think what needs to happen is a conversation about what role animals play in our food system and how animal agriculture can be made sustainable and affordable in our food system, and the limits of animal agriculture and the role of plant-based diets in supporting other goals like health and sustainability.
Controversial.
Thank you very much. It's controversial and same in Korea. And a few years ago in Seoul, we had a very similar thing we tried. And the second, I'd like to ask a question to Anastasia from Milan pact.
아마 필리포 필리포를 대신해서 질문을 받으려고 참여해 주신 거죠.
On behalf of Filippo, I have Anastasia. Thank you very much for joining us. In the presentation, they were able to see that the Milan Pact Award, about 250 cities are participating in the Milan Pact Award. So in a short term, how did you make them take part in the Milan Pact Award? And also, can you share how Asian cities are participating?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. So as regards Milan Pact Awards, yes, this year we had an exciting edition. In fact, it was the most participated one. And we had actually 133 cities submitting 250 practices. And we opened the call last May. And we gave cities around 2-3 months to submit their practices. And we instructed them about how to fill in their submission form. And we were available to provide any assistance or support in case they needed help in doing that. And yeah, I mean, that's it. It was for us, it was an easy thing to do because we just had to ask cities to send us their practices, but it was mainly the work of cities, of our signatory cities, that took the time. They filled in the form and they sent us the practices. And yeah, that's it. And I didn't get your last question about the participation.
Asia participation?
You mean in terms how many Asian cities submitted practices?
아시아 국가들의 도시들의 참여가
Yeah, how active the Asian cities?
Especially this year they have been really active also because we had several new cities joining the pact, and we are really excited about that, and we are really looking forward to work more and more with Asian cities and also expand the presence of the Milan Pact in this geographical region. And these cities are working a lot on food production and also food security. And yeah, they have been really active and engaged, and also showcased their experiences and their actions that they're doing. And yeah, we are really happy for them and looking forward to working more and more in the new year also.
Okay, 감사합니다. 예. 그래서 아마
Thank you very much for sharing. And we have Ms. Chung from the Seoul City government, and the Seoul City will work harder to share their practices and to contribute to the food security of the world. And they have great plans. And moving on to Maria.
There were so many questions.
And we have many questions, and let me ask one question. And on YouTube, we have one question. So for the city of Melbourne, for this food relief and the food delivered, like the produces like a fresh food, fresh fruit, how do you make sure, how do you source them, how do you get them to provide to these people?
So the organisation called Food Bank, they actually source the food from various sources. Part of it is state government funded, so they receive funding to be able to purchase the food. And then they also go to farmers and they collect food as well. So they do a lot of that collection, and then they bring it into the city. But what they do is they go and assess the site of where they want to park the truck. And they also find out a little bit more about the demographics of the community in that area. And they speak to the local agencies where people who are vulnerable attend for services. And they make sure that those agencies, they're given vouchers. So like a little card which says, you know, the truck's coming on this day at this time. And based on the audit of the site, of the agencies, of the discussions that they have, they then source the food from those, either the farmers through the warehouses, and then they bring that food into the city.
Thank you very much. We're running out of time, so thank you. That was great. And we will move to the next presenter. I'd like to ask a question. This is my question for you guys. So I heard many different cases of the other countries, and we are talking about this climate change and the climate crisis, and there are many policies to tackle this climate crisis. So I'd like to ask about the food plan and the strategies. And you've been doing a lot of studies. So I'd like to ask you, how are we addressing these climate change factors in our current plans? And to Director Chung, I'd like to ask, as a closing comments for this conference, from the Seoul City government, you have the food policy division, and which will be your priority area in the future in implementing the food policy of the Seoul City government. So first, Dr. Song, can you answer the question? Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank the presenters and discussants. Yes, climate change is a really important topic. And as I listened to the presentation, our response in our food plan, it's a really important part. And as I mentioned before, the local food index is one thing, and we have this local food index, and every year in Korea, at the city and district and the province, we have the survey and how they are working, but still we have a few cases where they have these responses to climate change, but for the school meal, they are not trying to do something in a gradual manner, for example, by reducing the waste. But what I think we need to do more is, like the Milan pact cases, we need to share more practices. But we are now at the stage of just collecting data and assessing the index and set it as just a yardstick for the progress. We need to do more. And thank you.
From the Seoul City government, of course, policies are a priority, but implement them with citizens is more important. As I mentioned in my presentation, it is critically important to empower citizens, and as part of that effort, that we're going to prepare initiatives to carry out the global health diet. We're going to make it simple so that our citizens can cook at home. We're going to provide the diets to promote vegetable-based, plant-based diets, but at the same time, we're not going to get rid of all the animals. We're going to make a holistic approach. Yes, since we don't have enough time, I think we have a few minutes, since we have very important, renowned scholars and also the government officers here, and especially it's morning in the US, very early morning. I'd like to ask our foreign speakers if you have final comments or question. Very simple. I can give you 1 or 2 minutes, your question or final comments. I'd like to give the microphone to Professor Cohen and Maria.
Thank you for inviting me, and it's been a pleasure to participate virtually and by a great distance. I think in terms of what cities can do to contribute to climate change mitigation, there are 3 things. I talked about procurement, but we also need to think about regional planning so that cities, when they invest in infrastructure and develop programs, consider how those programs affect regional agriculture. And regional planning is really critical and is not done very much. Third, it's important to think about ways to mitigate climate change impacts in cities through strategies like enhanced urban agriculture. I know that Seoul has a lot of urban agriculture underway, and cities can think about urban agriculture as a special kind of green infrastructure that can mitigate against storm impacts and also produce food. So I think we need to integrate our food planning with our resilience planning departments in cities. So I could speak about a lot of different issues, but it's exciting to know that food can be a way to address bigger problems like social disparities and global issues like climate change. Thank you again for letting me participate.
Maria, 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Comments. I also think that we do have to break down the barriers. So we did learn that through our strategies. So when you let go of all the barriers, you come up with very creative ideas, and the community can get involved and citizens can get involved.
Thank you very much. Although we are really far apart, physically, but we could gather together virtually to share our thoughts and ideas. Although we are living in different parts of the world, but we share these common challenges and we want to make positive changes, and we are one team here. So it's really great that we are on this the same cause and same goals. I hope this will be a starting point for our efforts to make a better cities and better food system. And this concludes the second session presentations and the discussion. Thank you very much.
네, 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much. We heard these cases and the panel discussion and the Q&A, and that is the end of our whole program for the conference. And I'd like to say thank Professor Kim Chol-gyu and all the discussants and the presenters for the interesting and insightful comments and the answers. And many people are really interested in this agenda, and developing the agenda and seeking solutions for this important agenda was what we have done to come up with the practical and realistic solutions. And we are working together. And the 2022, the Seoul Urban Food International Conference, we talked about the sustainable food system, and we had a great time. And I hope you enjoyed today's conference. This concludes the 2022 Seoul Urban Food International Conference. I look forward to meeting you next year. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.